Hey everyone, this is Mark Ryan coming at you with another video with Pastor David Clayson, and we are going to talk about John MacArthur's church. Hey, right now they're being told, hey, no singing, no communion, no shaking hands, no hugging, those kind of things. And so as Christians, how do we respond to that if we were to see that in our church for health and safety reasons? What do we do there? But be sure to check out Pastor David's channel. We did a collaboration on guns and God. Hey, as the government passes more restrictions on guns, how do we respond to that? And we talk about scenarios on what we would do if we were how to use deadly force with a gun, different scenarios where we would and wouldn't. But be sure to check that out, his channel out, and I'll put it in the description. And with that, one other thought is, hey, there's a video coming out, and we just scratched the surface talking about vaccinations. It's down the road, and as Christians, we have to start thinking about these things later and addressing some questions and issues on that. And so with that, hey, let's dive into it.
Give us some men who know the truth.
As you're scrolling down, as people are listening to this, realize that we are not saying that COVID shouldn't be taken lightly. What we're discussing here, though, is religious freedom when it comes to government restrictions and stuff like that. How much of a hand should government have and these type of things? So just realize that. I'm just thinking.
Yeah, I mean, like right now, there's conspiracies going around saying COVID's fake or this or that. No,
Yeah.
like we believe it's real. It's
Yeah.
taken
Yeah.
seriously. We don't want anyone to get hurt from it or die
Mm-hmm.
from it. And, like I work with people who could be really vulnerable if they get it. And so I try to be extra cautious. Of course, I'm an introvert. And so I kind of I like having time to myself and I avoid
Yeah.
crowds anyways. Um, but here's some of the other things it says is, hey, no singing. So if you're in church, no singing in church. Can a government say, hey, you could spread germs, you spread the disease and everything, no singing in church? What do you think on that?
I think the government shouldn't have a hand in church. I think there should be separation of church and state. That isn't to protect the state. That's to protect the church,
So what the argument there is, I mean, you're putting people's health at risk. They could die. And so we have to.
Again, I think I think it's up to the individual. I think you should allow the individual to choose. If they want to risk that, then I'll let them risk it, but don't take away their choice, Don't take that away from them. That's my thought.
Yeah.
And then, we talk about loving your neighbor, then is it
Is it loving your
you're
neighbor?
still, if you put them at risk? Yeah. I don't know.
And so I think what we're saying is that, or at least what I would say is, hey, that's up to the elders of the church to decide. Ideally, and they decide that, not through themselves, but through Jesus Christ, through scripture, because Christ is the head of the church and not the health department or the the government. And yet, obviously, yeah, again, we don't want to put people's health at risk and everything. And so it's a fine line. But when you have spheres of authority, like I believe in spheres of authority where the church, they have this circle of authority and others shouldn't barge into it. And the government has a sphere of authority and families have a sphere of authority. Well, the family shouldn't barge into the church's sphere of authority or the government sphere of authority. Like families, we can't be vigilantes. That's the government's job to do justice and all that. And the government, their role isn't to intrude into the family and tell families what to do in certain areas and like raising kids and different things like that. And into the church too. But I'll keep going. No communion even, because you got food, you got, drink, you could spread germs there. You're consuming things. No communion, they would say. For me, that's a problem. Yeah.
We still take monthly communion. What we do now, though, is we order those cups that have the bread, the wafer in the top, and then the juice, so it's all closed in. And then what I do is I just set them on every chair before the service, and so we have communion in that way to try to for safety stuff. But we still have communion, so yeah. I mean, that's a sacrament of the church. That's
and Jesus
commanded us, to do. Yeah,
this until I come. Yeah,
yeah.
And really, I mean, the early church, I believe, they took communion whenever they gathered. Really, there's a strong case. There's a strong case to be made. I would say that like anytime the church gathers, there could be communion there.
Yeah, but at the same time, communion back then is not the same as communion today. I think they had full-fledged
Yeah.
meals and not just one little wafer and a
It
little
was,
tiny
yeah,
cup and stuff.
it's different for sure. And
Yeah.
yet I think that's an area that maybe should be reformed too. So that communion's a bigger deal in the church almost.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think if you have it too much too, then you start to lose the sacredness of it. You start to lose the importance of it too. I mean, it's a good reminder each time, but it's a sacred thing too, But
So another thing, no offering containers. If person after person's touching it, you're spreading germs, you're gonna get sick,
yeah,
and all that.
we've put
S-
boxes in the back.
and a lot of churches have done that. My church
Yeah.
has done that for years, and they've done you drop your tithe, your offering in the container, and
But I think that would still go against that rule though too, because you still have a bunch of people going to one spot, that one box, and touching it as they're dropping it in, making sure it gets into the slot or whatever too.
yeah,
So
that's interesting, yeah. But I mean, you could give it without touching the container.
yeah.
But 16, no pew Bibles. And so a lot of churches will have Bibles in the pews.
Yeah.
And so that's been banned in a sense. Bring your own Bible. Maybe that's a good thing. People bring their own Bibles or use their own phone or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
No hymnal books. And then it says 18, no hugging
Okay.
whatsoever.
For half the people going to church, though, they don't mind that. They actually appreciate that.
Yeah. Just
there could be some weird huggers in church,
Yeah. Well, you know what I love that they did is, just getting rid of the church greeter. I'm all for that.
Yeah.
Why?
You don't like the greeter?
I'm an introvert. No, I just want to,
sneak in, sneak out.
Kind of, but if I'm going to talk to people, I'd rather have deeper conversations, not just like, hey, how you doing? How's the weather? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's just the way I'm built.
Interesting.
Yeah. 19, no shaking hands. Whoa.
Yeah.
20, this one kind of blew me away. It's like, okay, yeah, they're like really intruding here. Disposable seat covers that have to be changed between services.
Yeah.
It's so like they're going pretty extreme, but I mean, these make sense. It would protect people, from getting.
We understand where they're coming from. It's just like you think about all these things and it's money and money and money too, especially for these seat covers and having to change the way you take up offering and stuff like that.
And following all these rules, I mean, that money could go to missionaries. It could be going to other
yeah, I think a thought, and this would never happen, but I think churches would be much more likely to do these changes if the government paid for it.
Yeah.
Like, I think churches would be more open to it.
To some of them. I mean, like singing and stuff. You can't really.
Yeah. But so like the seat covers and stuff like that. But there was we went to a thrift store someplace that I'm not sure, it was in Fargo, a bigger city for North Dakota anyways, bigger city in North Dakota. And it was a thrift store. And instead of mandating masks, what they did is encouraged masks by saying, if you wear a mask, you get 15% off of your purchase. And in that way, like, gave incentive for doing it. And I think that was good. That
more positive. More positive kind of way.
I think the government should take a hint from.
Oh yeah. You'd still get people angry over that too and upset.
Yeah, but
in this day,
then you could be like, hey, the government's giving us money because we're following this.
Oh, and then there's just a couple more things. Services have to be shortened instead of, you preaching for an hour like you do every time, I'm sure.
No, mine are actually, people want mine to be longer.
Yeah.
I preach like 20-minute, if that message.
Just preaching and stuff, it's hard, I think, to go beyond 20 minutes or so. Because you put a lot of work into a sermon and it takes surprising how actually short it goes by a lot of times.
I think you start, especially now with like our generation and younger, you start to lose people quickly now. Like they wouldn't like.
People don't have the attention span that they used to.
Yeah. Anyways, kind of off track there, but
maximum meeting area, 400 people instead of 3,000. So we're going to tell like how many
Wow.
people can even go to church. Can the government do that, would you say, for health and safety reasons, say how many people can meet there?
No.
No.
I don't think, no, for all these things, no. I mean,
Yeah, that's up to
that's overreach. That's overreach.
the elders of the church can decide that. If they say, hey, we
Yeah.
don't want, as many people for safety and health,
Yeah.
then do that. And just saying, hey, it's the elders of the church, their responsibility, I think that's a good way to put it, because then, hey, they're responsible to God for those decisions that they make.
Yeah.
And they do that through prayer and through those things, not just, wake up
Mhm.
one day and, hey, this is what we're going to do. And then the last one, anyone who comes in contact with anyone from outside their family for more than 15 minutes has to self-quarantine for 2 weeks.
I don't know how you track that. I don't even know how you would begin to track that, especially even if the limit's 400, how do you track that in a group of 400?
That's hard. I mean, the government will send health department officials and everything. Maybe
How will they
Biden-
know? You could just say,
Well,
hey, this is my sister. How would they know? Like if they go into a service and be like, if they don't regularly attend that church already,
that's not too crazy though, because Biden Harris, they could say, hey, we have a pandemic going on. We need more health department workers and everything. And they could go to churches, they could go to businesses and all that, and make sure that health codes are enforced and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't seem crazy, at least.
So then question,
Yeah.
what would you feel about the church banning, if they found out someone was a health worker and that they were there for that purpose, banning them from attending?
From not letting them in and everything.
Yeah.
I think
How would you feel about that?
I think that's been done. I don't know. I'd have to look it up with John MacArthur's church. I think they let them in, but churches have to think through that issue. Are we even going to let them in? And
What would you do?
well, if they don't let them in, they get fined for that. Is
What would
what's
you
been
do?
happening. I like how you just keep saying that. Would we let them in to hear like the gospel message and all that? I think I would. So they can hear
that'd
the
be a tough
gospel,
one.
so they can hear the gospel and
That's
worship and
true.
all that.
Yes. But I don't know.
And
That'd be tough.
well,
I think it'd depend on the individual.
but what you
Like if they,
Mhm.
if like in that big group, if they're busy just writing a list throughout the whole sermon, then there's no point out in there anyways for that. But if,
depending on their heart and everything, yeah.
yeah.
But I've seen churches in California, just watching the live streams and everything, they meet and there's more of a powerful just worship, more of a powerful just service and everything, largely because of all the opposition that they're facing. And they're not taking their religious freedom, they're not taking it for granted. Whereas in Montana, we go to church, we never think, hey, are we getting fined, are we getting persecuted for it? Whereas other countries, the church is underground. If you get caught, there's consequences.
We've seen in the history of the church that the church has grown the most when there was persecution.
Yeah.